In a world where A-Dub and E-Ray have left their mics, a man emerges from Bill and Ted's phone booth that also kind of looks like a DeLorean to give the people what they didn't even know they needed. He captivates the masses with his stories of quantum leaping from one wrestling era to another, comparing and contrasting the wrestling world of old with the wrestling world of today in only the way he can. Ladies and gentlemen, Let Me Book the Territory proudly presents The B.A. Show, featuring Sean from Fourth Rope Wrestling, powered by the Embrace the Turn Up Network.
Thank you, Big Voice Man, and hello, people of planet Earth and extraterrestrials out there if you somehow are getting this podcast, but welcome to Let Me Book the Territory Presents The B.A. Show, featuring the homie Sean from Fourth Rope. It is I, B.A. DBIC, a.k.a. Black IRS, a.k.a. the Quantum Leaping MFing man out in the building, here to bring y'all some more nostalgia for all of your nostalgia that you love out there, can't get enough. We are here to bring you more, and as far as what we got for you tonight, it is gonna be a doozy. Lots of wrestling, got a big card, but before we get to said big card, let me introduce my homie, my guy. If I was a pro wrestler, I think he'd be my manager because he's so goddamn smart. He knows the business in and out. He knows it like the back of his hand. The genius, as I call him, the genius of the Fourth Rope. It's the homie Sean. Sean, what's good?
Yup, how we doing today, man? Second time. It's becoming a lot more natural to me now, so I'm actually pretty excited to get into this long-ass card that we got today. 9 whole matches of wrestling, like you were saying, putting that southern twang on it. So I'm ready, man. Let's go.
Oh yeah, man, gotta put that southern twang on it because the pay-per-view we are talking about on this second episode of the Side Pod is the 2007 edition of Vengeance, which so happens to be technically, maybe, kind of the first Night of Champions.
Sort of.
It sounded the title technically is Vengeance Night of Champions, like a Vengeance : Night of Champions, kind of like the title of the show. But this we wanted to get into, of course, it being Night of Champions season. We got a hot and heavy World Heavyweight Championship tournament happening right now on SmackDown and Raw. The homie Sean and I thought it would be no better thing, or to be, it'd be. I don't know what else we would do here this evening as far as not talking about something concerning the Night of Champions. And it's got a pretty storied history at this point. At least, like I'd say, it went away for a little bit, came back. I'd say they have at least 10 or 11 of these under their belt at this stage in the game,
yeah,
right? Something like that.
It's an extensive list, yeah.
Yeah, I know it went away for a while when the homie Sting caught that L from Seth Freaking when he exploded my man's spine all across the turnbuckle. But
yeah,
they felt it was time to bring it back, and no better time than to bring back a pay-per-view or now a PLE like Night of Champions when you bring back the big, sexy, kinda big gold. And I say kinda because it's definitely the vibes, but they didn't bring it back as is, and I'm cool with it. But Sean, did you you a fan of the new Big Goldie? Can we call it Big Goldie? Because it ain't all gold. It got that dub.
It's not Big Gold. It's like Big Gold with like a BBL. It's not really the same. It's different. It's like you can tell it's the same, but it's just like, damn, that's all right. That's pretty obvious. Like, all right, cool. It's all right. I like the design of it. It works for a world heavyweight title, in my opinion. It gets the point across. It's good.
I agree. The BBL analogy is very good. I like that. So you got Big Goldie went to go see Dr. Miami and came back looking just 2023'd up with the new dub on it and the old school decorations of like the stuff that makes the Big Gold Big Gold. Mm-hmm. I have one of the versions of Big Gold on my desk signed by the 16-time World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair. who does have a match on this card we will discuss. But yeah, big fan of that. Also, speaking of Southern twang, as you said earlier, this pay-per-view took place in Houston, Texas. Sold out show at the Toyota Center, home of the Houston Rockets.
Beautiful.
You know, every show is sold out according to JR, so we're not going to worry about the attendance.
I don't even think
but Sean, no, they just said sold out. You know, this is like, just say it's sold out, damn it. Like, I don't give a fuck what number it is. Just say it's sold out. It looks good enough. But no, and on a more serious note, Sean, you being a ruthless aggression era more centric guy, and me being more of the new generation attitude era centric guy as far as like when we grew up in this, tell me about the pulse at the time. Like, not only were you watching wrestling pretty heavily as far as this being in your heyday of being a kid, but also this pay-per-view happened right in your backyard, brother. So tell the people a little bit about that.
So that's the one thing about wrestling. I have a very fond relationship with Texas crowds in wrestling, whether I'm in the crowds or I'm watching them. I think Texas crowds are one of the best. But as far as the atmosphere in, 2007, when I was watching, I was about 10, 11 years old, man. And I literally had a chair that I would sit down in front of my little TV and watch every single Monday. And I think it was on Thursday night back then. I can't remember. It was Thursday night. Exactly. The era of wrestling, these had all of my favorites that are pretty much dying out right now on the wrestling game. You had, the rated R era of Cena. The Hardy Boys were on this card. Trevor Murdoch and Lance Cade, they had a good match together. I mean, there was a lot of...
I got questions, yes.
Yeah, there was a lot of people in this era of wrestling. I think this was probably my favorite, even just biased because I grew up in it, but that pulse of it was unmatched in my opinion.
Got you. I figured, I mean, like the crowd was pretty hot from what I could tell. Great crowd. They were all into it. Nobody was like not paying attention. Everybody got deserved pops and boos were appropriate. Very good crowd. As you said, Texas always shows up and shows out historically. And then also I thought as we get into the card and I thought it was a cool touch to bring back the legends that held versions or iterations of the belts before the match started. I thought that was a classy touch.
It was.
Now me being the guy that's kind of wasn't really in the product too heavy at this time, I kept a pulse on it enough to know what was going on, but I'm nowhere near watching it like I do now. But was this like the standard for Night of Champions, Sean? Like, would they always bring back legends, or was this because this was kind of like the first iteration, kind of maybe they wanted to experiment with it?
It was kind of a mix of, this is a lot of a time, legends were heavily used around this time in the WWE. So I
could tell by this card.
You would see a lot of Tatanka, Jimmy Snuka, Roddy Piper, Sergeant Slaughter, people like that, the mid 80s, early 90s gimmick legends. They would heavily use those, and it was out of respect. They wanted to give them their time, their shine, let the newer age people, because I mean, I have to be honest, if they never did put them on TV, I wouldn't have as much knowledge growing up of who these people were. I would have never seen a Sergeant Slaughter or a Jimmy Snuka or a Tatanka besides, what my parents, showed me on old tapes and reruns. So it was kind of the standard in this time as far as using legends. Now, as far as Night of Champions, I haven't seen all of them, so I can't really answer it there, but legends were definitely used in this time.
Got it. And you can, like I said, as we talked through this card, there was a lot of people I was shocked to see, like, not just making an appearance in the crowd, but wrestling a match, like a whole ass match.
A whole match.
Shocked me, but to your point, and I never thought about it from that perspective, so I'm glad you explained that. The bridge to the, at the time, kids, which was you, at that point in time, understanding who these legends from the 80s were, that didn't get a chance to see them in their heyday, or at least see them on the tapes like we used to have back in the day. Because we didn't get the live shows until Raw came around in the early 90s. All we got was Superstars on Saturday mornings, and then on WCW was WCW Saturday night. That was really it for real. You get some random stuff here and there. So it's cool for that to be a way for those guys to be in the ether of people's minds that were kind of growing up then that didn't see them. Also, I think Vince was just trying to get those dudes a check too, which also respect. Those guys helped build what this is now, as far as what it was versus what it is at this point in time in 2007. So, I mean, I know we got a lot of strong opinions on Vince McMahon, and as do I. I know I do. I have my gripes with him, but I'll give him that he always has looked out for people that have looked out for him and have been loyal to him. And this is just an example of that. So I give him props for that. Just as a businessman, I respect good business, and that's always good business when you look out for people that looked out for you to get you where you are and where you continue to go. But let's get into it. We here, match 1, the World Tag Team title match. Now, I had to go back and I was like, because there's another tag team match in this later on in this card. I was like, wait a minute. But I had to remember. I was like, oh, because they still technically are using the WCW tag team titles. And they have not done the brand split yet, which how they get there with the Raw and SmackDown tag team titles being technically WWE and WCW tag team titles. So that was some cool revisionist history that I had to go quantum leap and figure out, because I was like, since when? Like, I didn't know it was a Universal and a WWE title situation. But regardless, the World Tag Team title match, you have the Hardy Boys in this version of them. It was interesting version, versus two gentlemen I have never seen, one of which outside of just NWA recently, and Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch. I did a little bit of research on these guys. I feel like the people I had never seen in my life on these pay-per-views were active specifically in the years that I was not watching the product, like 2006 through 2009. Like, my eyes were nowhere near this. I was in college playing college football. I would occasionally, hey, if somebody had it on TV, hey, ain't that Randy Orton? I remember Randy Orton when I was watching in high school. That was about it. That was the extent of my wrestling watching at this point in my life. So to see those two guys and be the champs at that, I was like, what in the fuck is going on in the WWE? But you mentioned you have some history with these guys, Sean. Tell me a little bit about, like, were these guys like a legit tag team? They just look like WCW retreads, in all my opinion, when I saw them. But what's the deal with these?
So these two dudes, so Trevor Murdoch was really the muscle of the group. WWE's at this time, their tag team division, they had good tag teams. What they were lacking were a lot of good heel tag teams. And so these dudes kind of filled that void because they had good chemistry. They knew how to work. Even though Trevor Murdoch looks old as shit in how he looks, he's relatively young at this point. And so is exactly. And so is Lance Cade, if I'm not mistaken. He's not too old either. So they're
about the same age from what I read.
Yeah, so they're both relatively young. They haven't even reached their primes in their careers, to be honest. They were both worked very good as heels. The other, Trevor Murdoch just looks like an asshole hillbilly. Lance Cade played a real good cocky asshole as well to go along with them, two country boys. So it just worked at the time. It filled a void of what they needed. They needed to put the strap on a good heel tag team to let all their baby faces try to get a shot at them. Right place, right time. That's what I give it.
Gotcha. The number one thing that jumped off about this match, this was not a typical Hardy Boys style match. They kind of wrestled to the pace of Murdoch and Cade, I felt like. They were not doing I didn't see typical spots that I would see out of a Hardy Boys match, so I thought it was boring as fuck, to be completely honest. It was just a slow, plotty match. But, like, I was wondering, like, was one of them hurt? Like, they didn't look like themselves. And I know they were probably on their soon-to-be way out the door soon, or at least one of them were. Because I think the Jeff Hardy singles run is a couple years from this point. So it was a weird period for them. Of course I knew they were. It was just kind of a turn off to see them wrestle like that, not their normal style. Did you think the match was shit too?
If you're rough way to come in, but if we're being honest, it's not the traditional Hardy Boys match, like you say. If you're used to seeing them back in early 2000s, we're talking like WrestleMania 17 type deal when they're facing Edge and Christian Hardys. It is nowhere near that type of match and what you're going to see. The athleticism is still there, but the pace is slowed down because, Trevor Murdoch, now he's NWA guy. So he's always been an old school style, rough, tag team wrestling type boy. That's not going to mesh well with fast, high-paced Jeff Hardy going, top rope, twirls and corkscrews and things like that. So you got to slow it down to that pace. Those dudes they can't keep up with them. And then, at this point, Matt Hardy's still going through injuries and things like that with his back and all that stuff. So you mix all those together and it's just a weird mishmash bag of a tag team match.
Yeah, just look like it, man. That's why I was just like, this what we doing? But I felt like one of them had to be hurt for this to look like this, or those other guys could keep up. But the match was not my bag of tea, so to speak. But I get where you're coming from as far as like why it looked like that. So that makes sense. So moving on, match number 2.
That was quick. Well, if we didn't know, Caden Murdoch did win that match. They retained.
Oh yes, sorry, I forgot.
You're
to say
good. That's how much you did not like it. It's okay. Caden Murdoch.
I was so not aboard with this match. I popped for my boy IRS in the crowd. Shout out to Mike Rotunda, aka Bray Wyatt's daddy.
Mm-hmm.
AKA the man who I steal this gimmick from, a black IRS.
Black IRS.
Just the IRS part. You can't steal the black part, but that's me.
Absolutely. But it was a slow
Yes.
match. Caden Murdoch won by pinfall. Nothing special there. So we can head straight to match 2.
Yeah. This was the most shocking match for me, for all more ways than one. As far as this match, this is the WWE Cruiserweight title match. We had the champ coming out first in Chavo. I'm still a heel on Twitter, damn it, Guerrero.
Fuck Chavo Guerrero.
Versus Jimmy Wang Yang.
Old Jimmy.
Bruh. What in the fuck is a Jimmy
Did you ever get to see
Wang
Jimmy Wang Yang?
Yang. No.
Jimmy Wang.
This was the first time I've seen this.
Jimmy Wang Yang is classic mid-card filler cruiserweight talent for WWE in the mid 2000s. He's the guy you're going to be seeing fight like Nunzio or someone like that. When Billy Kidman or people like that, the mid-card talent, they're workers, but they are nowhere near top superstars to be even sniffing, world championships. They're gonna be U.S. title, cruiserweight title, intercontinental title guys.
I feel you, and nothing disparaging against the man under the gimmick. Not his fault. Vince and Bruce Pritchard did that to him, because even though I don't know that, I know that just looking at the gimmick and the presentation and the signs in the crowd, I'm like, bro, this is such a problematic time. But we'll get into all the problematic shit. But as far as problematic go, that's the only thing that was problematic on this gimmick. Dude's a great worker.
It was
honestly
great match.
Yes, I was gonna say one of my favorite matches. Woke me up from that bullshit that opened up the card. Got to see you got to see your boy Dean Malenko.
Dean Malenko,
because they showed
man
him
of 1,000 holds.
There we go. Not to be matched by Jericho's 1001. Shout out to that classic promo from Nitro back in the day.
That was hilarious.
Yes. So Jimmy Wang Yang, I thought that he should have won this match. In all honesty, he put it on Chavo, but Chavo, he showed him like he was the vet. I'm going over tonight, but Jimmy got me bought in like the crowd was bought in. I'm like, man, this dude can go. Like, he's wrestling in fucking cowboy boots and a pair of G's. I was highly impressed for him to be doing the type of moves he was doing. You think this shit was fire as I thought it was?
I totally understand. I always loved Jimmy Wang Yang because I actually watched him like actively when I was a kid. So I love Jimmy Wang Yang. His style is like really unorthodox, but I guess that might go with, because he comes down in a cowboy hat and a wife beater to country music. I don't know. It's weird. But I mean,
like I said, bro,
dude,
problematic,
but dude takes like a shitload of bumps, high flying, like, top rope moves, things like that. It's and they know how to tell a story in the match as well. He's really good with his facial expressions and selling and things like that. It's one of those gimmicks and dudes where, you got a weird gimmick, but it works, just not enough to push it to the top. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah. And in the age of repackaging that we live in, that's what he needed. They would have like how they very bad example, but how they did Reggie to Scripps, and I guess now Reggie again. I haven't seen the latest edition of NXT that came on as we record this today, but it's a good example of if they could have repackaged that guy into something more believable than just some weird Western, but I'm Asian gimmick, it would have been better for him. But yeah, another one like Murdoch and Cade, at least in WWE, they're only active for like 2 years in WWE. The exact years I did not have a close eye on this product. It's just that shit intrigues the hell out of me that there's these wrestlers, and I you know, I'm the quantum leaper. I'm pretty savvy in that space of randomness in back in the day wrestling. But this is intriguing to me, man. Like I may go seek out some more Jimmy Wang Yang matches after this. Who knows? But in the match, like we said, it was a great match. Chavo ends up winning with this frog splash, of course.
On the back.
Yes.
Just like his dad.
Wow. Yep, dad and his uncle. Yes, sir. But yeah, like I said, great match. Just that gimmick was the more of the thing to talk about to
exactly
me than what was happening in the ring. So we then go from that match to another thing I forgot about at this time, the fake Mr. McMahon death when he walked into the car that made mainstream news at the time.
Yep.
And that's the only reason why I know, because I remember it being on the news cycle that people really thought Vince McMahon was dead. If I even remember furthermore about this, and correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm speaking out of school, but I believe even Donald Trump made a comment while this is happening to further buy into the kayfabe of the quote unquote happening that he passed. That's what made people think it really happened.
It was a mix because a lot of news outlets and things like that were picking it up as legit news, and because as soon as the broadcast ended, like this is something that's imprinted in my head. I watched this live. I still remember where I was and what I was doing when this happened. It was one of those things with wrestling. Because mind you, I'm a 10-year-old kid, 10 or 11 years old at the time. So when I saw this happen, and then afterwards it was on news outlets, and then WWE.com themselves confirmed Mr. McMahon has passed away and all this shit. And I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? And then something else happened after this that we'll get into in a minute that just further solidified, and it was like, yo, shit is going down, bro. And it was just everyone picked up into the kayfabe, and then with the Donald Trump comment, the news outlets commenting on it and running live articles and broadcast with it. It was a wild ass time, man. Stocks were dropping in WWE, all types of shit, dude.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I remember the mainstream reaction to it more than anything. Like I don't have as vivid a memory as you do, just because where you were at and what you were doing at the time. I just remember people saying that Vince McMahon walked into a car and it exploded. And after I watched, I'm like, oh, that shit ain't real. Go home. But yeah, bro, completely insane. And it makes me wonder if they would have kept this story going for how long, because it got them a lot of attention. But one of the biggest tragedies in decades in wrestling took place this same night of this event, which leads us into match 3. For the vacant, shout out to vacant, undefeated, always captures all the titles.
All of them.
He is a son of a bitch, boy. Always gets the belts. So for the vacant ECW title, Johnny Nitro, who was supposed to be Chris Benoit, versus CM Punk.
PG Punk.
PG Punk. Couple years into the Punk era, if not even maybe a year, to my understanding. But like I said, Chris Benoit was supposed to be the person to wrestle CM Punk in this match and win and go over Punk on this match. But unfortunately, as we know, other things took place that evening that I will not get into too heavily on this podcast. I just remember it being like you said, Sean, the Mr. McMahon news, and then this news. There was a lot of confusion going on, and made me cut my TV on Raw. I know that much to see what was happening for real. For real. But it makes me wonder, like I said, if the stuff with Benoit never happened, would Vince have kept that kayfabe death going, and how much steam would they have got out of it? You being the more, I guess, imprinted mind in this time, what are your thoughts on that?
He would have kept it going for a while, just based off of that initial reaction in under 12 hours even. I mean, 8 hours even. I mean, immediately after the show, it was everywhere, and you know, people were actually buying into it and things like that. They would have kept that going for a long time. I heard, you know, just off of scouring and doing research now later in life, I heard it was supposed to end something with like a Triple H and Mr. Kennedy match, if I'm not mistaken. Somehow that was supposed to work into it.
I do remember hearing the same thing, because Mr. Kennedy, even more so, this I was not watching, but I remember this, the whole Mr. McMahon has an illegitimate son in the WWE. And that son, I know it ended up being Hornswoggle and kayfabe, but it was supposed to be Mr. Kennedy, who also deserves a deep dive at some point. Because I've talked to my pod mates on the main show about Mr. Kennedy. I'm like, there's something about that dude that makes me feel like he should have had a way bigger run than what he did. Because he seemed like he was fire on the mic, he was really good in the ring, and he sold that gimmick of Mr. Kennedy. And I love the fact that the microphone would drop down from the sky and spotlight. That dude gives me goosebumps to think about a presentation like that. Like, that is just so much.
If you ever get into a Mr. Kennedy discussion, I have so much I would say about him, and because I've watched so many videos and interviews about, you know, Ken Anderson, bro, and you know, that's one of, like, he was, you know, getting towards main event at one point, which things happened, which you know, like I said, we're not going to get into because it's not about him. But things happened which led him out of there, and then he had that TNA run, which kind of he let out his own self. So you could kind of see what kind of wrestler Ken Kennedy was, and Ken Kennedy's the shit. Absolutely.
Yeah, man, I get the vibes. I've seen very little of his work, but I mean, like, I feel like I got the eye for when I know a gimmick that was over versus some bullshit.
Money.
And that stuff looked like it was
over. It was money,
time.
bro. It was money.
But yeah, like you said, today's not the day for that discussion, but I'm heavily intrigued in watching back some pay-per-views or some shows that he was heavily involved in to get a better understanding of his run and really get into the weeds with you on that. But we're in 2007 still at Vengeance: Night of Champions.
CM Punk versus Nitro. If you CM Punk,
yes, CM Punk versus Nitro, not Morrison. And yeah, man, we got one of the most controversial figures early on in this match, still making noise in the controversy arena. CM Punk, man. I think it's pretty interesting that Punk is still like the zeitgeist of controversy just for basically existing. Like, the guy can open his mouth and he's the subject of discussion for like a week or two. Like, it's very interesting and intriguing. I hear a lot of pundits like the Eric Bischoff who can't stand the guy and think he's selfish and he's all in it for himself. And him showing up at Raw a few weeks back shows you the type of dude he is. And you got dudes like younger guys or guys that wrestle with him that think the world of him. So since Punk is still very relevant at this point in the card and even right now in real life, what are your thoughts on Punk, Sean? Because we have never really discussed CM Punk being such a WWE-centric podcast that we seem to be most of the time.
Absolutely. So my first introduction to CM Punk was through ECW, the rebranded ECW or revamped ECW that WWE brought back in this time period. I was a big CM Punk guy. I loved CM Punk. I loved the gimmick. I loved his wrestling. I loved his style. And I never really understood why, because at that age, I didn't know what indie wrestling was. So I didn't know what Ring of Honor was. I didn't know that existed. I didn't know he wrestled there before. I thought everybody that wrestled came through WWE and that was it. And then I
Yeah.
learned of TNA and things like that. So CM Punk, great first impression. I love the dude. I loved his wrestling. Very controversial figure still to this day, but I even loved his, current run all the way back to his debut stuff. Big shout out to Paul Heyman for making that happen. I don't know if you know the story of how CM Punk got to WWE, but shout out to Paul Heyman. I'll just say that.
Okay. I know vaguely. I know like tea leaves, but I've never done a deep dive on the Punk to WWE. I know Heyman took to him because he was kind of like a kid floating around without much to do, and when Heyman sink his teeth into something, he gonna make it look how it should look. So yeah, big shout out to him because that's definitely an era I've gone back and watched heavily. Is Punk's run from like 2011 to when he left. But with Punk, like I said, big controversy. And one thing that jumped off the screen for me in this match is, man, CM Punk, as far as his work rate, has changed so much in the ring.
Drastic.
Yeah, he was such a like, not to say he's not a worker, but he was just faster, quicker. He could do more. Even though his moves at this time in 2007 looked a little unorthodox, now stuff just looks very awkward that he tries to do from back in the day.
Yeah.
No knock to him. The dude he's beat down. No knock against him. The dude has been wrestling and doing combat sports and all that kind of stuff for the last 20-25 years. So trust me, I understand the body breaking down, but you would think to a certain degree, and I know he's probably familiar with this, he would start changing the style up a little bit, because I feel like a lot of his AEW matches, he was trying to cling to this type of CM Punk in some matches, in some instances, and I think that's why he would get himself hurt, because he ain't this dude anymore.
He's trying to use the same style as when, his earlier days, which, that's cool if you wanted to, bring back, like the Pepsi plunge and all that stuff like that. Cool. I mean, that stuff's going to get you hurt, bro. Exactly. Dude's style is very, very unorthodox. I even made comments, when I was watching this match, like, man, his shots and his kicks, especially his kicks, because,
look
so much better, precise. They looked heavier, they looked more meaningful and like believable and things like that. It just made CM Punk look like just a way, way, way better wrestler at this time. Him going back and forth with Nitro, and props to Nitro, because Nitro was a dope ass wrestler.
He came into this match cold. I'm sure when he walked into the arena, he didn't know he was wrestling that night.
Yeah,
gonna win the title.
Exactly. Yeah, man. So
even more.
Shout out to him for going through that whole situation and things like that, not knowing what the hell was going on, and then just saying, "Yeah, buddy, you're getting the strap put on you," and out of nowhere. So that's a great wrestler, great wrestler. CM Punk is a great wrestler. It was a very back and forth match, a lot of holds, technical wrestling, and things like that. I fully expected when I first watched this, CM Punk was going to go over. Did not expect Nitro to get the belt. So great outcome to me, and honestly, nice match. This was on par, probably, I would say, not as good as the Chavo match, or the Chavo and Jimmy Wang Yang match, but very close.
Agreed. I wouldn't put it up there either with Chavo and Mr. Wang, Jimmy Wang Yang. Yes, there we go, Mr. Wang. Pause. But yes, with this match, with, like you said, it was not that match with Chavo and Jimmy Wang Yang, but it was a great match in general, especially considering the circumstances around it and Johnny Nitro's professionalism in it. Two questions for you.
What's up?
The first one is the easier one. Have watched a ton of like old school ECW in your wrestling years, or was that something you never really touched on?
So whenever they made it available for streaming, I went back and watched some pay-per-views from old school ECW, like old school like Terry Funk death matches and barbed wire ropes and all that crazy shit, and an original Dudley Boys and the tie-dye, all that shit.
Cussing the crowd out.
I have seen them. I didn't watch, a ton, but I've seen a little bit. I see a little bit.
I got you. I was just kidding, because that's me in my heyday. I was about 10, 11, 12 in that ballpark when ECW started coming on at 2:00 in the morning on the local sports channel in Cleveland. Me and my brother, closest to me in age, on Friday, because it would come on Friday nights, and we would sit there and try to keep each other up. Like, cause there's this show that comes on, that used to come on in Cleveland, would show like late night movies and stuff, like B movies and scary movies and shit. Me and my brother popped heavy for that, so that would go off at like midnight, and then we would try to play video games and shit to keep each other up. Some nights we would make it, some nights we wouldn't. But yeah, I remember watching those particular ECW episodes heavily because this is where they were doing the WWF invasion with Jim Cornette and I forget the other WWF talent, if any, that showed. I think it was just Cornette showing up there when I think back. And the stuff they were doing with Dreamer and Sabu and RVD and Bill Alfonso.
Was it Lawler? Or am I crazy? Or was it Lawler?
It was Lawler.
It was Lawler. I was like, I'm trying to think.
Lawler and Cornette, because it wasn't a talent, but I knew Cornette was not by himself. But one thing I remember from that was Tommy Dreamer getting hit with Cornette's
his racket,
his tennis racket.
Yeah.
And he said that it like ruptured his spleen or some shit like crazy. And he had to get stitches. It was wild. As a kid to hear that, I'm like, how does a tennis racket do that?
Switch that boy to the side and then came down.
I was about to say, I saw the shot and I was like, oh, okay, got it.
He fed that boy a live one, bro. He fed him a live one.
I wonder if Cornette ever got his receipt back for that from Dreamer. But regardless, that's the ECW that I was used to growing up on. So when they did this rebranding, bro, like it was. If they wanted to push me away from WWE, this is a good way to do it.
It was trash.
Do this rebranding of
it. It was garbage. It was absolute garbage.
Yeah, and one day, because I've watched it like through highlights, December to Dismember, the last ECW pay-per-view. We'll discuss it one day. That'll be a fun deep dive because they said that's the worst WWE pay-per-view ever known to date. And I think that deserves
really.
Yeah, as far as buy rate, as far as ticket sales, as far as the card itself, yeah, it's a shit show. I've heard Bruce Pritchard talk about that on Conrad Thompson's show years ago. In fact, 5 years ago, maybe, was talking about how that show was like an embarrassment. It put that whole brand to they got rid of it after that. Like there was no reason to keep it going.
Okay,
but. That'll be an episode in the future, no doubt. But we spent a lot of time on this ECW match. There's a lot of stuff going on around it. But my second question is, my last one on this match, we'll move on. Do you think at the time, and you would know better than me, that Johnny Nitro represented what that brand was about? That I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm curious on your thoughts around the ECW title. They had just took it off of Bobby Lashley because they just did a draft. So I know that much. But Johnny Nitro being that champ for that brand, what's your thoughts on that, brother?
Do you remember who the previous champion was?
Yeah, Bobby Lashley.
Do you remember who else has held that belt? Vince McMahon in a do-rag.
Oh yeah, do-rag Vince.
Do you think any world championship is legitimate if Vince McMahon in a do-rag has it around his waist?
Oh. Yes, as long as he's not dropping M-bombs, you are correct there.
Sir, that championship was 24/7 title status. It was it's garbage, bro.
I smell that through the microphone.
Anybody that won that championship that they're like, I'm a world champion, like props. I'm not a wrestler. I've never won a championship, so I can't say much. But if I was to, say some criticism, that ain't no damn world championship, bro. That's a
fair point.
That is a title. I'd say you've won a title, but you ain't won no damn world championship.
Fair point, sir. I kind of felt the same, but I needed to hear some ruthless aggression reasoning behind it. And do-rag Vince was something I've completely blocked out of my brain that could have been happening at this point in time, but that checks out.
Because they're trying to hold it to the same stature. Does Johnny Nitro with the ECW championship look as on the same level as John Cena with the WWE title? Absolutely not.
Not in the slightest.
Absolutely not.
Not in the
So
slightest.
yeah, my bad. I didn't mean to interrupt. But yeah, man, that's just
No, you're good, dude. All good, brother. We just talking wrestling. All good. So from here we go into the old school WrestleMania 12 package, one of my favorite main events of all time. Brett and Shawn. They show that, and then we get a Mick Foley and Randy Orton promo that then leads into our Intercontinental title match. Interesting match. We had Ricky the Dragon out as the legend associated with this match, and then we have a questionably tough, I guess, Santino Marella and the OG Samoan with the thumb with the spike, Umaga. Not a bad match. I was shocked.
It's not, because Santino Marella came off when he was introduced as, this inexperienced guy, but Santino Marella is actually really fucking good at wrestling.
Is he like, was this an MMA gimmick or no? I felt MMA gimmick when he came out.
What, Santino Marella? Do you remember how Santino Marella debuted?
No, not at all. Was not.
Okay, so Santino Marella debuted against Umaga, if you did not know this. Okay, so just quick flashback. I'm just going to take you through, okay? Yes, Vince McMahon in a fedora comes down with Armando and Arnado Estrada. You remember the Cuban guy? The
dudes that were Alberto Del Rio, right?
No. This is Alberto Estrada. So this guy, or Ernesto Estrada, I forget his name, but you got to look it up. It's a Cuban dude, smokes a good cigar, always came down with Umaga. So Vince.
Oh, I remember him. It was manager.
Yes, his manager. Vince McMahon comes down with him and says, "Does anybody want to fight Umaga tonight? We'll put the title on the line." And he's like, you in the crowd. And so he picks out Santino Marella from the crowd. And Santino Marella's like, well, me. And so they bring him through, and Umaga proceeds to beat this dude's ass. Well, here comes Bobby Lashley. Bobby Lashley now comes down, beats up Umaga, and then puts Santino on top of Umaga and holds him down for the pin. And that's how Santino Marella is now your Intercontinental Champion, who is now defending against Umaga.
Got it. Because they mentioned that very, in passing, that Bobby Lashley was the reason why Santino Marella is the champ right now. I didn't know that great detail of it. That helps out a ton. So Santino Marella's crispy new right now. In WWE.
He's not he basically came out as like a super baby face, like a guy out of the crowd came out and won a championship, and now he's defending it, and you're supposed to.
You can too.
Yeah, exactly.
WWE live event, because anything can happen.
Exactly. So he came out as this inexperienced fan, but no, Santino Marella, dude has a wrestling school, bro. Like, he's legit.
He knows what he's doing.
Okay. Absolutely.
Got you. So that's why I said, it seemed to me, being ignorant walking into this as far as what was happening on the week to week, he seemed like he had more of a more serious gimmick than what I've seen from him with the Cobra and all the silly shit when he's wearing the singlet. That's the Santino Marella I've been used to see. So this threw me off for a second, but giving that background, it all makes sense, especially the tone of this match, which is Umaga beating the shit out of this man pretty much for about 8 minutes, until to the point I have not seen a disqualification like this since 1991, where the ref says, you won't stop hitting him? All right, fuck it, I'm throwing the match. Right, I was like, what happened? I had to rewind it 3 times. What the fuck did he do? He just didn't listen to the ref.
That's a rule in wrestling. You got a 5 count to get somebody out the corner. He didn't listen to the 5 count. Hey, man. Throw the fucking match out.
I haven't seen the shit since 1991, actually be used in a serious fashion. So that shocked me, but it furthermore caused the beatdown to become more beatdownable.
Oh my!
Then we get the spike.
God, bro, because I was sitting here I was just looking at the beatdown. He didn't even pull out the spike until later, bro. So he's sitting here beating the shit out of Santino Marella, and then he gives him that fucking that hip hit all the way in the corner. You know what boy Solo Sikoa does nowadays? That was an original Umaga move. Same with the Samoan Spike.
Oh yeah, a lot of his style.
Yeah,
this Umaga's his uncle.
Yeah,
right?
Something like, if I'm not mistaken, it's his uncle.
Yeah.
So yeah, bro. And then Umaga beats the shit out of him, and then goes away, and then comes back with the Samoan Spike, and then does him in, bro. Pulls out the blower and just fucking kills him. It's like, it was bad, man. It was bad. And then the thing about it, the thing that got me too was Santino was the babyface, and if you listen to the crowd, they're sitting there chanting one more time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm like, bro, why would you do that to this man, bro? And so,
exactly.
Yeah, so that's kind of that one. So Santino Marella retains his title due to a 5-count disqualification, which is some of the stupider ways to, win or retain your title, but it works for, a crazy ass Samoan beating the shit out of a guy that can't defend himself. So, hey, whatever, keeps the title.
As we see in today's product, people love to watch Samoans beat the shit out of people that are defenseless.
Samoans rule the wrestling world, bro.
Big
fighting world, period. Let's just keep it there.
In every degree of it, you got a Samoan somewhere, bro. Somebody in that Fatu family. Or linked up to it, at least. But yeah, not a lot to really talk about what happened in the ring. Like you said, it was just a beatdown of Santino Marella. Very fun to watch, very entertaining. But that's just all, it was. So from there, we go into an awful fake FBI presser.
Oh my God.
I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, can we at least make this look real? Or they try to make this look fake?
Yeah,
It looked like it was on closed circuit television, like in somebody's apartment complex. Oh, bad.
It was terrible.
Oh, bad. They could have kept that.
Yeah, and then the other well-known person that the CIA dude was talking about, that would have, even added more shit to the storyline that they would have continued on with the Vince thing. So that just would have added more layers to it, and I'm just like, all right, man, whatever. And then to follow it up with a Vince McMahon memorial, the photo on the screen, Raw's gonna be the Vince McMahon memorial. It's just like, all right, bro, this is some fucking bullshit. Like, what is this?
It really makes me wonder what could have been, man. As far as the whole gimmick and what they were trying to do there, but hey,
it would have been a top 5 bullshit gimmicky storyline for WWE. It would have been up there with like the Dominic Mysterio and Ray and Eddie beef over the custody. It would have been up there with that, bro. Like,
yo, there's a lot of crazy SummerSlams in this time frame. Between that one and the Shawn and Hulk SummerSlam, there was some wild SummerSlams.
Some stupid shit, man.
I can't wait till August. That's all I'm gonna say. So we go from that awful presser into the U.S. title match. My guy from back in the day growing up, Magnum TA. More of my uncle's guy. He was the legend that they showed, representative of the U.S. title.
Mm-hmm.
But Magnum TA, to give you some history on him,
please.
Sean, he was supposed to be, at the time, like the guy to beat Ric Flair and become the next dude in WCW/NWA. He was gonna be Sting before Sting, so to speak.
Okay.
He got in a tragic car accident, cut his career short. It was bad. Like, you should Google the image of the car that he was in, that he got in that wreck, and it's crazy the dude is still alive. But there's some old school like cage matches from back in the day. I remember my uncle putting on for me. Magnum TA was that dude, for sure. Great wrestler, great gimmick, for the time frame in which he was in the product. Career cut entirely too short. So I think it's fitting that in this match, your champion MVP, and this is very interesting to me, that Ric Flair was wrestling MVP. I had to go do some research on this one myself because I was curious. Like, wait a minute. Why is Ric Flair wrestling for mid-card titles? This doesn't make any sense. So I went back, looked around, made as far as what was happening at the time. They had like I believe it was like a tag team match on like a SmackDown or Raw. MVP and Ric Flair were beefing during it, and that's how we got to this match. Was there anything else happening leading up? I feel like this is kind of just thrown together off of that episode. But is there anything else?
Well, I'm not going to be 100% because, it's been years since I was watching.
Yeah.
But as far as what I remember, there was no significant storylines or anything like that. I just remember tag matches between the two. This was when Ric Flair was kind of in that weird state of post-evolution, just floating, kind of.
Until he retires.
Exactly.
A year. That WrestleMania is in 2008 or 2010, where he
with Shawn Michaels.
The Shawn match.
Yeah. I don't. I think it was 10.
I feel like it's 2000.
You thought it was 8?
I think I could be mistaken, but
we can confirm.
We
can confirm that.
We'll worry about that.
Yeah, but
as far as when we get to those WrestleMania.
Exactly. So there wasn't anything significant, man, leading up to this shit. I'm not a big Ric Flair guy. Around this time, I think all of his matches were pretty boring, to be honest with you. If I'm ever rewatching a pay-per-view and a Ric Flair match comes on between, the year of 2000 up until he leaves WWE, I skip it every single time.
Yep. And the most accurate reporter on the planet Earth, Google, has confirmed 2008 was that WrestleMania. Okay. So this makes sense.
That does make sense.
He's like in this weird period of time where he's kind of waiting for something to do. But regardless, it told me like him and MVP must be really cool for him to put over MVP for no reason, basically, because it wasn't like MVP needed the rub. MVP was going at the time, as far as his gimmick, his whole like presentation. I forgot how dope his theme song was back in the day. I
love it, bro. MVP's whole presentation, Montel Montanious Porter, was like he had the whole blow up entrance and like the fucking like smoke that comes out, and then you like bust through like a fucking football team and shit like that. It was a great presence for MVP. I loved it.
And in my younger years, when I first saw his gimmick, this is how I know it worked. I couldn't fucking stand it. I thought it was stupid, but he was a heel, so it worked. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. On BA the Mark at the time. MVP, like I said, that theme song, I think I rewinded it like twice just to play it again, because I forgot all about that theme. That bitch goes. I had that shit on my playlist for working out, like in the guard. But yes, this match wasn't a lot going on in the ring, as you said, Sean. Ric Flair, and I agree. This stage in his career, you're not getting the bangers he used to put on back in WCW, unfortunately, and you should not expect to at this stage in his career. Not getting all the selling, you're not getting all the action that he could do as far as in ring. You get the wrestling movements, you get the facials, you get the selling to a certain degree, but not like he used to back in the day.
Yeah. There was in this match. I wanted to actually time it. I pointed out to myself like there's like 4 different spots with like hold transitions. And I swear it was like up to 10 minutes of say the match was like 15 minutes or 10 minutes. Half the match were holds where Ric Flair was in some type of choke or, hold like that. And it was like, it was pretty bad. And then he got busted open like midway into the match from like, I think it was like a kick off of a apron. And I'm just like, all right, man, that's cool. Whatever. that's fine.
That boy Ric Flair looks for any excuse to add that crimson mask on his face to add for the match. He always does it.
Whatever.
Did it in his last match, but yeah,
whatever.
That's his forehead, not mine.
Whatever.
MVP ends up retaining in this match. He gets the good old heel win by hitting a low blow on babyface Rick.
Yep.
Also, have always hated all stages.
Wait, no,
of
it was an eye
career.
poke.
Oh, I thought it was a low blow.
It was an eye poke. He turned around because for some dumbass wrestling logic reason, the referee is trying to restrain Ric Flair, and MVP hits him with the and just rolls him up. Just Ric Flair match.
Yep,
Ric Flair
in and out. But I was gonna say, in all of his reiterations or all of his iterations of Rick, I've never liked babyface Ric Flair. The gimmick does not match babyface as far as who Ric Flair is. He's never been a babyface all like that in his career too much. The only times that stick out in my mind is when the NWO were on their original crazy shit, and the only like stable to go against them was the Four Horsemen, get their asses whooped and embarrassed every single week on Nitro and Thunder. That's like the only babyface Rick I remember. His WWF and WWE runs were all pretty much heel runs until this point in time, and then I think he goes out kind of as a face when he fights Shawn Michaels.
Yeah, Shawn Michaels has to turn
that
heel.
Whole build,
Mhm.
yeah, that whole build was kind of like Rick was like the sad old man trying to get the crowd to care, and Shawn was like, I don't want to do this, but I will do it.
Old Yeller, that ass.
So, yes, he did. Yes, he did. So, like I said, not a ton of action in the ring, but Ric Flair must have really liked MVP to do this match.
Did the job.
That's how I look at it. Yes,
Props.
sir. Rick don't just do jobs for anybody. Big pause there. Oh man. Speaking of problematic, wild matches, we got match number 6 here on the card. The WWE Tag Team Title match. You got the champs, Deuce and Domino. Don't know who the fuck they were, and I can't wait to hear Sean talk about taking a Deuce and Domino versus two legends how I did not expect to see walking down the aisle.
Super.
Supporter on Twitter of the pod, the homie, the man, Sergeant Slaughter versus the problematic, and we will not get too much into his career, Jimmy
Dear
Snuka.
God.
Yeah.
That's a whole different thing. Yeah, man. But yeah, the match. Absolutely.
Whoa. Yes, we will try to keep this on the match as much as possible. But hey, this is a podcast. As long as we're not saying too much egregious shit, I'm good with getting into the weeds of it. There's a whole fucking Dark Side of the Ring episode about it if you want the details at the end of the day. But this Deuce and Domino gimmick, I got heavy Andrew Dice Clay vibes. Sean, do you know who Andrew Dice Clay is?
I do not. Educate me.
Oh, let me educate you. So, in your Google machines, kids out there in podcast land listening, type in Andrew Dice Clay. He was a comedian in the early 90s that had like this Elvis gimmick, but I remember I was about 5 or 6 years old, and my family like loved putting on Andrew Dice Clay stand-up because he was so like raunchy and out of control. Like he had a joke. He used to say, like to the rickety dickety doc rickety dickety doc, your mom sucking my cock or something like that. The mouse hit one, your mom said, like it was this hella inappropriate type of just those types of jokes from back in the day. So when I saw these two jokers come out, I was like, Andrew Dice Clay. And also like 1950s gimmick. Never seen these dudes, like I said again. Seems to be the theme of the guys, the mid-carders on this card. They were only in the WWE for like 2 or 3 years. From like 06 to 09, I feel the vibes were heaviest with these types of mashed together tag teams. But Sean, you was here, man. You was outside. I obviously wasn't.
Oh yes.
Tell the people about these folks.
Oh
man,
yes.
I'm still in shock that this is the tag
So
team.
I was outshied on SmackDown. I was a big SmackDown dude back in the day when these cats, Deuce and Domino, were graciously giving us, I think they, what did the announcer? I think he announced them from the other side of the tracks, Deuce and Domino.
Yes, the other side of the tracks.
Yeah, that's
yes.
what I'm like from back in the.
Whatever the fuck that means from 1960s.
Exactly.
Thanks,
it's
Vince.
like
thanks for that logic.
This is like if they just put on Grease and just chose two of the dudes that were with John Travolta and made their best cosplay and then wrestled. That's what this is, Deuce and Domino. Very ass, very, very bad. I was very surprised that they actually put belts on these people.
That's the biggest shocker, dude. Like we had nobody in the back.
I would have rather you put it on Superfly and Sergeant Slaughter at that point, like than Deuce and Domino. Like that's like a Trevor Murdoch and Lance Cade situation, but just way worse. Way worse. They just don't work.
At least I can buy the Southern. I'm really 25, but I look 45 gimmick. We see that outside.
Compared, if you were to put those two in a match, Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch, Deuce and Domino look like straight up jobbers, bro. Like.
Yes, dude. I was shocked. I'm like, what is this presentation? Like, I know I'm not watching wrestling from the 80s, and I like to our point earlier when we were talking pre-pod. That shit wouldn't even flew in the 80s, bruh. Like that would have been hard to get over then. So who, and they were not right mind, obviously, thought this shit was okay. Not to just put out as like the match on the card, put these dudes out there, but to put titles on them.
Belt
like
them
that just
up.
shows you Vince gives no fucks about tag teams. This is like history books on like this stuff. This is to be the third or fourth chapter in that book.
They're still recovering from it till this day. Like tag team division in the WWE, I can't name a time that it's just been fruitful from when I've been watching. And that's just men's.
Yeah, from
we're
your
not
era
even,
watching,
and we're not even going to talk about women's wrestling. That women's tag teams have been fucking abysmal. But in men's tag teams, even from when I've been watching up until recent, I just never can imagine a point where it's been fruitful. So you get bullshit tag teams like this that get belted up. Like, it's like a old school, or not old school, but if I was to compare it to someone nowadays, it's like a Viking Raiders of 2008. Shit just doesn't work, bro.
That's a great analogy.
It doesn't work.
Nobody gives a fuck about
exactly. It just doesn't work.
As far as in this iteration, but with this gimmick though, like it was telling to me, like the fact that you got to put these guys out there with two guys that can't have a match for longer than 12 minutes, more than likely. Like they were doing anything to get these guys over, like to have this match with these legends. Because to your point, I would have rather seen those guys with titles. At least I know who these guys are, even though they have no business holding titles. So
Deuce and Domino
like
has business holding titles?
No, not at all. Not from what I saw in the ring. You know, I'm always gonna give it a chance in the ring. As soon as I saw the gimmick, I was just like, no way. And the gimmick just sold me further on this being an absolute
travesty
situation. Right, and that's the point I was gonna make about tag teams in the WWE/F. The only time the tag team division from my watching days has ever been really worth talking about was the era that they lucked into all of this when they got ECW and WCW's talent. Was Edge and Christian, Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys. Those three are the most serious tag teams in the last 25 years to roll through there, in my opinion. Outside of, I think, like guys you can argue about now, the New Day. Man, Dub, you gonna love hearing me say this. The Young Bucks.
I mean,
those are more serious. I can't argue with it. I mean, they're an established tag team. That's all they've done in their whole career is wrestle as a tag team.
New Day, Young Bucks, Usos, the Revival, FTR, whatever you want to call them. I'd say the solid ass tag teams that have rolled through, the last few years in wrestling.
For sure. The Lucha Bros, of course.
Oh, favorite.
So yeah,
absolutely.
Yes, I know them your boys for sure. But yeah, so like I said, this match, what the fuck? You got Jimmy Snuka in this match before all the problematic stuff came out about him after he passed away. I'm not getting into details. If y'all want to hear that story, go watch that episode on season 2, I think, of Dark Side of the Ring. There's an hour and some change episode on the piece of shit Jimmy Snuka was. And like I said earlier, they were just strictly there to try to get these guys over. There weren't any other legends that were coming to do the job, I guess. So, you had those legends, and you had Rick Martel and other dude I never seen wrestle in the outside. I hated seeing I hate when the older guys come in and interfere and they get all like, I'm just gonna just hit somebody again. Because Rick Martel, I remember the model Rick Martel, that was such a great gimmick. And he came into that ring looking like a fucking Star Trek nerd or something. I was just like, this is bullshit. I don't want to see guys that I used to look at on not a pedestal. I mean, Rick Martel wasn't a great wrestler or anything, but his gimmick sticks out in my head as from childhood. Oh, that dude, that's the model Rick Martel. He sprays arrogance in the air and has a certain
aura. There's an aura to it.
Yeah, and how those guys come back all crusty and old and not even trying to revive their gimmicks. And you had Sarge and Jimmy Snuka keeping it alive at least, but
bro,
I'm not.
That was.
I just looked.
Oh, that wrestling.
I just looked at my notebook and I just saw a bullet point that just said, "What the fuck was this?" Like I literally wrote that down.
Literally.
So I don't want to sit here and berate and beat up on these dudes too much.
I will.
On a pay-per-view event that was 15 years ago. But what the fuck, child? What in the entire fuck?
This was some.
This
is some bullshit. This was and this
right.
is call out, bro. Like I said, this was one of the times that WWE leaned too far into those goddamn legends, bro. And I'm not disrespecting legends. Don't get me wrong, man. They help pave the way for where everybody's at right now and where everybody needs to be. But I don't need to see Sergeant Slaughter giving Deuce and Domino 3 Cobra clutches in a match and Jimmy Snuka trying to fly off the top rope and fuck up a pacemaker. Like, and then the way he won, it was a fucking crossbody into a roll up. Like, that just
get me out,
bro.
of here.
That's worse than dark match, bro. Like pre-show type shit. That is terrible, man. And I
would have much rather watched the dark match that was on this card. I'm sure. I don't know what it was, but I'm sure it was better than that.
They should have just cut this match, put Deuce and Domino in a 3-way tag team match with Lance Cade and something, and fucking combine those titles to get rid of the WCW design and fucking get some new titles in. Anything else other than that, bro? Because Deuce and Domino,
yes.
They had no business. No business.
Way to quantum leap and book the territory, by the way. Shout out to the main show there. That was impressive. Because that does make a lot more sense than this bullshit. But luckily, we get a match to wash the taste out of our mouths from that. Because this is a way better presentation. Speaking of big gold, the World Heavyweight title match between Rated R Edge, and Batista in a last chance match. It wasn't a bad match. It was some good action. It was kind of weird to see Edge as this like kind of like presented as being like this weaker than, and I get Batista's the beast, he's a monster, but Edge is still Edge though, and he kind of like was, and we'll get into it here shortly, but I feel like he was doing stuff like he was like low-key like a bitch that didn't deserve the title, but he just keep winning because Batista's a hothead. So that was the vibe I got from it. But hey, this is your era, Sean. Tell me about this last chance match. Why is Batista not allowed to wrestle Edge again for this title?
Well, one, too many tries. Batista has challenged for the World Heavyweight strap a lot. And then another way, with your point of Edge being like, you know, a bitch that doesn't deserve the title, in a lot of Edge's wins, he's either gotten them in, you know, a bullshit heel way, cash-ins from Money in the Bank, or disqualifications, or he retains from disqualifications. So a lot of the times, that's how Edge wins these shits. So the first time around, what does he do? Hits him with a low blow, retains his title. Teddy Long comes out, and then restarts the match and all that stuff. And then Batista ends up losing by throwing Edge in the ring first on a count out when the match gets restarted. So thus meaning Edge did not shit to win his match, and it was just a fuck up on Batista's end. So Edge has all these different ways that he just wins his titles and gets around and, you know, avoids it more than going through it. And it's a weird way in a weird run, but I enjoyed this era of Edge. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, like this is the most infamous pay-per-view in my mind that sticks out from this period of time of wrestling in the Ruthless Aggression era was One Night Stand 2006, which is a year before this, of course. The Raw after that event, when Edge came out and took that title, I believe, off of RVD at the time. Fire. Super fire, bro. That whole pay-per-view. So it was cool to see kind of like the remnants of what happened from that event. Mm-hmm. As far as Edge is where he's at in the card. Batista, who wasn't around at all really at that capacity in 2006, now in the main title picture. It's evidently challenged for it so much he can't even go for it again after this match. Because Edge, even though he got Batista by him like 3 times at the end of this match, he still won. Because Batista's a hothead. So what were your overall just thoughts on this match in general, Sean? You thought it was as good as I thought it was?
It was a good match. If you enjoy Edge matches, you'll think it's good. Batista and Edge have this methodical style to both of them. Batista's more of that, brute force, big power bomb, type dude. Edge is a lot more, sneaky, chameleon, snake heel. Still good with the technical wrestling. Don't get me wrong. He has a great, repertoire and, arsenal of moves that he can go through. But I like the match. It's not going to be some technical masterpiece, Dave Meltzer 7-star match that, you like, but
Tokyo Dome jerk fest.
But for a world heavyweight title match with Batista and Edge, I enjoyed it. It was a great match, big moves, false endings, things like that. And then I wouldn't have expected the end either. I'm not satisfied with it. I always like me a good old pinfall, but a count out, and Batista screwing himself by throwing Edge in the ring first. Just, a good way to end it. It's not cliche, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, it mainly was happy it was the chaser I needed after that rough shot of crap from that WWE title match. So it got me right where I needed to be with this card. As far as like, okay, I can still watch this. This is decent wrestling. I'm here for it. Seeing these two great workers do what they do. Work great. So yeah, like I said, not a bad match. And then the next match, I'm sure we're not going to have a ton of thoughts on. I got a couple things to say. It would be the WWE Women's Championship with Melina and her. This is the era of her and Johnny Nitro being like that whole like LA Hollywood gimmick.
Eminem, bro, you don't like Eminem?
I loved Eminem. That was that was a tag team I remember on the way out. Because Homeboy, I forget his partner, like he hit his face on a ladder or something.
Joey Mercury.
Crazy. Joey Mercury,
who is now like a producer or something for WWE backstage.
Yes, he is. I remember seeing that spot when he got his eye like basically concaved into his head.
Yep.
Crazy spot. But yeah, I was a fan of them. That was a tag team I remember watching on my way out from watching on the regular. But this is the more controversial portion of the match. Miss Candice Michelle. The one thing that stuck out from this match was me texting the fellas like, "Hey, ain't this the chick that Vince, got into a lot of trouble with?" They was like, "Yep, that's her." I'm like, "Got it. Makes sense." And yeah, so this was basically just ringing of the whole Vince controversy that's been going on in present time for the last almost year.
Wild.
Also told me more about just like, because between the gimmicks I saw, the fact that, spoiler alert, she goes over in this match. Candice Michelle, it told me Vince was super duper running shit at this point in time. Had his hands in entirely too many things, no pun intended. But yeah, not a lot of action in this match. Not the work rate we're used to seeing from the ladies that go hard in our product today. So there's, like I said, I don't think there's going to be a lot to discuss here, just because of the parties in which that are wrestling. What's your thoughts, Sean?
Okay, listen, I will give it some props, given that 5 years prior, women in wrestling, all they did was have fights in mud pits and bikinis. Okay, yep. So I'll give it props that it was a actual wrestling match for a legitimized women's title. Was it good? No, it wasn't. Candice Michelle never really was a good wrestler to me. Melina's a decent wrestler.
Yeah, she's a good worker.
Melina's a decent wrestler. I think she did some work in like what was Lucha Underground, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. I can't remember what other promotion it was, but she did some work and it was cool. But I like Melina as a wrestler, especially back then. She wasn't the best. She needed a little more skills, way better than Candice Michelle, so she was going to have to carry the match. Not too much you can say about the in-ring stuff. I really didn't even write too many notes when I was watching it. I already knew what was up when Candice Michelle went over. If you know the history of Candice Michelle in WWE and Vince and all the stories that came out now, yeah, it makes total sense why she went over. Absolutely.
Yep. Basically,
Clean too.
That's what I'm saying, bro. I'm just like, huh? Like, okay, I guess this is the envelope of the cash that she got. But anyways, on to the main event, the 5-pack challenge.
Hectic ass match.
Man, for the WWE title, spinner title, we have our champion John Cena versus Legend Killer Randy Orton versus, and I'm so sorry I missed this gimmick, King Booker. That shit looked like it was fire.
You missed King
whole
Booker?
talking with the English accent.
Oh.
I didn't see any of it. The last iteration of Booker T I saw was him and Tourette Syndrome Goldust were in a tag team, and The Rock making fun of them. That was the last memories I had of Booker T before I started seeing him pop up in the main event Mafia in TNA. So I was completely out. I knew Booker T was he ran with the King of the Ring gimmick, but I didn't know he leaned into it to this level.
He revolutionized it. Now, how everyone is doing it nowadays is because of King Booker, and I'll die on that fucking hill, bro.
I love the little dance he did.
He does the whole shimmy and then puts the pinky. And bro, it's the best, bro. I'm telling you.
Loved it, bro. I was popping for that heavy, bro. That's one thing. Like, I haven't been upset that I missed a lot of this stuff live because you can watch it back. But I would have loved to have seen Booker T in action at this capacity doing King Booker shit, because I could just tell the backstage segments had to have been fire with him doing.
They belted him up at one point. He was world heavyweight champion as King Booker.
I remember seeing him with
bro. I mean, for something that's take Booker T and WCW Harlem Heat Booker T, bro. Think about that dude. Mm-hmm. Now put him in a crown and a cape, speaking in a royal accent, holding his pinky up. It just doesn't sound right on paper, but it worked. For some strange ass reason, it worked enough to put a belt on this man eventually and be in freaking main events and with people like Cena and Orton and things like that. Wild ass concept, but props to fucking Booker T because he reinvented himself when he needed to and it worked.
Shout out to him, yes. He's almost like Jericho as far as the king of reinvention. Jericho will always be the king of reinvention to me, considering he's still reinventing himself on a regular basis. But Booker T is definitely there as like 1B, no doubt. But yeah, to round out the 5-pack challenge, we had Mick Foley, who I was shocked to see in this match in 2007. I'm assuming this is a part-time deal. And then the Almighty, before he was labeled as the Almighty, Bobby Lashley. I kind of told you about it pre-pod, but we'll get into it now. I watched this match a few different times just to make sure I was grasping it appropriately. Because the first time I was like, this is kind of quick. I feel like a match like this should have had more going on. I also wasn't watching it as closely as I did the last 2 times. Upon those watches, no doubt match of the night, and as your main event should be. It was a lot of action in this match, a lot of finishers being given out of nowhere, so many RKOs out of just things that should not be coming out of RKOs. I saw Bobby Lashley jump over the top rope and it looked crazy. Like, he got about 3-4 feet away from the ring. I was like, God damn, I didn't know he could jump like that. Oh yeah. That was crazy to me. That was wild. The outside of the ring stuff, it was so much happening once I actually sat down and dialed into the match to take my notes for the show on it. But in my opinion, just because of the star power and the style of the match that all of those guys had, match of the night to me. At first, I thought it was going to be Jimmy Wang Yang and Chavo watching it. I was like, oh, this is definitely still a show. Why the fuck is Jimmy Wang Yang putting on a show right now? I don't even know who this guy is. So in my mind, that was going to win. But once I saw this and watched it back a couple times, I'm like, it has to be this. Mostly because a match like this for a champion in this match like John Cena, and we know the run he goes on after this for the next what
10
10
years.
years from this point. This was the first, like, I guess, parts of the Super Cena build. Is that a fair assessment?
It's parts of it. It's not the original origin story, but it's definitely parts of it. Having Cena run through basically what 1, 2, 3, arguably 4, definitely 3 of your top main event talent at the time, in Orton, Lashley, Booker, things like that. That's some heavy shit. And you know,
Big
absolutely, time. And that's some heavy shit. And then with him already going through Edge at points at the already at that point, he's taken out a lot of your main talent like that. And you know, you've already put him on a pedestal above everybody. So this is when Super Cena was definitely a thing. You already know into the match, you know, oh, Cena's retaining, he ain't losing, you know, whatever, bro, whatever. It's like Roman Reigns nowadays. You know, Roman ain't dropping them shits right now. Like, yeah.
Facts, yeah. Another part of the reason I like when I would come back into look into the product, I was not a John Cena fan, just because of the way he was being booked. After the fact and seeing like things now, present day, I get why they lean so heavy into John Cena, because why wouldn't you? The dude was the total package across the board, and he was a guy that wanted that top spot. He wanted to be doing all the Make-A Wishes. He wanted to be doing all the press row stuff. He wanted all of that attention for the brand. So much respect to him in my older years, but my younger adult years, I could not stand the Super Cena run, and I felt like it was holding guys back. But after seeing the guys that were being held back or not being on TV, I get it completely. But fire match altogether, man. Great way to close out a show with all of these types of matches. As far as the match goes, there wasn't much more I would have wanted from it, honestly. This is how you put over a guy that's supposed to be put over. You get a bunch of guys that he's had crazy battles with or are on other or been on other shows, and you have him go over like crazy. And them dudes sold for him and showed out. So, yeah, match of the night in my opinion, man. No doubt.
That's a fair opinion, you know. Even when we were talking before the pod, I compared it to, if anybody that's listening has watched it in recent time, it's like day one pay-per-view. That match, that main event, it was chaotic as hell. It's kind of the only way you can do 5-man matches like this with these big of people. Everyone's got to get their shit off, basically. So you got to have big spots with everybody, you know, big jumps with Lashley and over the barricade spots and giant slams and all that shit. So it was a good way to do a 5-man, let everybody get their moves off, not make everybody look like shit. Nobody really looked like the weaker link, in my opinion, in this match. Maybe Mick Foley, but that's just kind of because it's Mick.
By design.
Exactly, it's Mick Foley. That's literally Mick Foley's gimmick. But right. Everyone else, Lashley looked good, Orton looked good, Booker looked good, Cena, of course, Super Cena. I think everybody was pretty protected in the match, to be honest. But yeah, overall,
not an easy feat in a match.
Exactly, like it's not easy at all with that many top people. You know, if you had 2 or 3, you know, bullshit mid-carders that you could throw in here that could take the pin or take most of the big moves, type like that, it would have been a lot easier to get a lot of shit off. But with main eventers like that, you got to be very limited so you don't fuck up someone's image and things like that. But overall, great match. I liked it. I personally can't say match of the night in my opinion, but very close. Very, very close.
All right. Well, since we at the end of the card here, Sean, I'm curious, what is your match of the night, and what is the overall thoughts on this good old pay-per-view?
Overall thoughts on the pay-per-view is it is your run-of-the-mill, above average Ruthless Aggression pay-per-view, kind of dying out towards that point, because once you get to that 2008, 2009, I think that's when they went like PG, things like that. Yeah, this is kind of dying out towards those times, but really solid for me. It had all your great people. You had your Batista, your Edge, your John Cena, your Orton, you know, people like that, staples of that era. So you got familiar faces, long card, 9 matches. The 2 main events were pretty decent. Women's, if you were looking for women's wrestling on this card, I'm so sorry. You did get a match, but it was not, you know, it didn't deliver in my opinion. Plenty of tag team wrestling. If you into some tag team wrestling, it keeps you engaged the whole time because every match is a title defense, or for one it was vacancy, so it was determining the winner. So if I was to scale it out of 10, I'd give it a solid 5.5 stars. Maybe 6, depending on how if I watched it a few more times. But solid, very solid. Match of the night goes to my boy Chavo and Jimmy Wang Yang.
Oh, so you went with the cruiserweight.
It's just
Fair enough.
I'm a sucker for cruiserweight matches, dude. If they're executed properly with good, crowd participation, clean spots, things like that. Jimmy Wang Yang is a great seller, so he takes like nasty. There was like a hip toss into the turnbuckle, and then he took a bump off the top rope where he dropped, and it was great. I liked it.
You would have absolutely loved Nitro when I was a kid, because every single Monday Night Nitro opened up with some crazy ass cruiserweight match.
Mm-hmm. So I've heard.
So I've heard. So I get your affinity and love for it. I definitely love that shit too, especially to open up a card. I feel like there's no better way to get people going for a wrestling match, or excuse me, a wrestling event, in all honesty. But I already said what my match of the night was. I'm gonna lean a little bit higher than you on the rating, man. I'm gonna go 7, considering all the things that was happening on this card and what was happening backstage at the time too. There was a lot going on, I'm sure, more than what it normally is, with Benoit not showing up. Some pivots that had to be made during this card. The fact that they had like legends on this card that had no business being in a ring, in a WWE ring at least, and they're still able to let those matches not suck the air out of the room. That's not easy to do, to kind of still have that bullshit intermixed with stuff people actually want to see. So I give them the higher grade for that effort, but this is by no means a great pay-per-view. It was cool.
Cool.
That's why 7's average to me. So I have to give it that point. They were battling against a lot. But there you have it, folks. That's your first ever Night of Champions, technically speaking.
2007 Vengeance Night of Champions. Technically the first one, but technically not.
Right. You can tell this is a test run. They were seeing that this is something that they could really do. Like you said, 9 matches, a marathon. This probably went off at like 12:30 at night when this was running at the time. Sean probably had to go to bed early, I don't know, or he stayed up and still watched it. So yeah, I get that completely as far as this being a longer card than what we were typically used to seeing from WWE. But that's the show this week, folks. Episode 2 in the books of the B.A. show with the homie Sean. Next week, we will be bringing something centric to Saudi. That's the goal. What it's going to be, we will see. But it'll be something centric to the Saudi Arabia shows that have happened in the past. So me and Sean will go to work for you guys, the listeners. But in the meantime, Sean, drop your handles. Where can people find your genius at work, sir?
Oh my God, man. Like I said, there's only one place, Fourth Rope. That's it. At Fourth Rope, that's it. Not too many followers on there. I talk shit mostly some days. So if you want meaningless rants about random topics in pro wrestling, then I'm your place, bro. I'm your place.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate your randomness over a lot of other folks on Twitter. I can tell you that. He's one of the more sensible people in the IWC, which is hard to find sometimes with a lot of the characters that seem to dwell in Rome. But yeah, you gotta know, recognize your homies and keep them close when you see people like-minded folks in the IWC for sure. But as you know, you can always find me nowhere, because I don't have any personal social media, but I do run our illustrious Twitter handle at LetMeBookPod. Getting the other stuff going. I've been yelling at the fellas that we gotta get this all to sync up on IG and Facebook, so coming soon on that. In the meantime, you can find everything Let Me Book the Territory centric at our website, letmebookpod.com. That's where you can find the whole feed for all of our episodes. These episodes, as far as the BA show featuring Sean, and then also our main feed, 84 episodes deep now. 100 around the corner. Very excited for that milestone. We've done a lot on this road to get to where we're going, and we got to definitely celebrate that.
Salute.
So that's a big milestone coming up. But yeah, find us every Friday. Episodes released on everywhere you can find podcasts, basically talking about the current product and all that is great and not great about the current product. So yeah, so if you love your nostalgia, keep your ears here with me and the homie Sean. If you want to know more about what's happening on the day-to-day, check out me with the fellas, A-Dub and E-Ray, every Friday. But that's your show here today, folks. We will be back 2 more weeks from now. The every other week schedule is still sticking until further notice. So in the words of the illustrious Tribal Pod Chief, everything is wrestling. To sweet us when you see us. And as the homie E-Ray would say, let the magic wash all over you. And I'm going to just say, we out this boy. Peace.